let me more or less respond to what he was asking, and I think I can respond to it in a way.
Almost a
Oh, is
client.
he back? Oh,
Exactly.
good. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think you've raised these scenarios for us, including that dreadful thing that we never talk about, a nuclear war, whether it's a dirty war with extra state actors or all out war. So I think that you've given us a lot of food for thought. And I believe we already have one question. Uh, I think. Let me see. Here's a question from Mr. C. N. Subramaniam. Your analysis seems to be still based on older strategic considerations like financial and military power, and seems to ignore new issues like climate change and sourcing raw material from indigenous people. Though I think you mentioned raw material very definitely. I heard you speak of raw
Sure.
material, uranium. Anyhow, do you think these two issues will impact geopolitics? So we already have the first question for you, sir.
I think issues like climate change. It's not that they are unimportant, but they presume a high degree of cooperation between the nations in the international system. And I also have to say that you have to take all these promises to do something by day after tomorrow with a large pinch of salt. I remember in 1971 there was a conference at Stockholm where people were saying there's one more week to save the world, otherwise the world is going to sink. I've had 50 years of climate change, and the urgency of climate change. Uh, I have I'm very skeptical that the Paris conference is going to succeed. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But climate change is a global threat, but there are intra-global tensions which cannot be forgotten. It is not going to be ever the case that China and USA would say, we really ought to worry about climate change and not about who is going to be technological leader in cyber warfare. I don't think that's going to happen. So yes, the idealistic challenge is there of climate change and of lots of things like that. But I'm here not to make you happy. I'm here to make you unhappy because I want to talk about reality. And I think what you were saying, Macron, is right. Yes, India definitely belongs to the Western camp. There's never been any doubt in my mind. I also have a slightly unorthodox view, which I ought to say something now because then it will start another sort of pair, which is when Buddhism left India, India left Asia. Buddhism left India at the end of the first millennium of the Common Era, more or less. India left Asia. And India aligned itself with the West that long ago. But that's a story we can think about otherwise. No, my view is that the conflict of power, conflict of material interests. Say you mentioned rare materials, rare earths, and the way China is going into these rare materials, and Americans are certainly finding they're no longer the top dogs. That is where wars are going to be, and whatever facade is put on about peace and human rights and all that, that is where it's going to be. Now, I consider the Middle East to be in transition. I do not think that the Saudi royalty is permanent. I mean, it may seem very, very, very powerful right now, but given the collapse in the oil price, which is likely to be longer run than we think, it's very rare for a monarchy to have survived this long in the Middle East, because the previous monarchies which were there in Egypt and Syria and Iraq and I mean Jordan is still there, but they've gone, and so we will see, because eventually um, they are there are tension in Saudi Arabia. I won't go into, but so thinking from the Indian perspective, which is what we were doing, I think the diaspora has a problem, uh, that ultimately people will say, where do you belong? Are you American or are you Indian? You see, Kamala Harris is a very interesting example of this. You see, people have all sorts of hopes of Kamala Harris. That Kamala Harris would be with India, you know. Kamala Harris will not necessarily be with India, not the India that we take it as India. And I think I'm certainly sure that on problems like Kashmir, uh, Biden will not walk the plank as Trump did, and Kamala Harris is not going to be helpful. I know I know her parents, and I knew her when she was 1 year old. So I can't say I know her, but I know the culture, the left culture she comes from, and she's not going to be on India's side as much as Indians think. But also, if you are a UK cabinet minister of Indian origin, your loyalty has to be with UK. I mean, it would if push comes to shove, Priti Patel or Rishi Sunak or Alok Sharma have to be British. Come on, the British electorate elected them, and while we all would like them to forever ever Indian, and that would be betrayal of your democratic responsibility. I know it's an unpleasant thing to say, but one has to be realistic about this. And luckily Americans and Indians are getting along very well, uh, and long may it continue. But there are going to be conflicts about this man. No, I think Manmohan Singh was the person who openly decided to side with America. I mean, that is when India and America have more or less a understanding, if not a pact, that what I call a just in case scenario, in case either of them is fighting China, the other will come to help. America doesn't have the numbers in terms of soldiers. India doesn't have the technology, and so China has both. So India and America will get together to fight China. That to me, and it's a very interesting story that when George Bush and Manmohan Singh met for the first time, George Bush quoted something from the Bible, from the Gospels, and apparently Manmohan matched in quotation for quotation from the Bible, and Bush was very impressed because Bush had not thought that there was this man who had, and Manmohan, in a sense, I'm very fond of him, and possibly one of the most well-educated and, in academic terms, the brightest prime minister India has had. I mean, there's no doubt about that. You don't get a double first in Cambridge, otherwise. But and so he was able to talk to George Bush on his own terms, and that is one of the secrets of the Indo-U.S. Sort of friendship. But I think where else will India go? Because it is far too big in South Asia and Southeast Asia to be able to get any help from anybody else. The only other thing is China, and China and India have never been ever they were never had any military relationship because Tibet was in between. You know, uh, until Tibet became part of China. So, and I think letting Tibet go was a big mistake on our part. Goodbye.
Thank you. I was struck by a couple of things you said, which I found really fascinating. The first thing is when Buddhism left India, India exited from Asia. I think that's a really profound statement. And one can actually extend it in a different way because when you travel east, as I've done, I've been to China 9 times, to Korea also around the same, Japan elsewhere. It seems that when Asia exited Buddhism, they also exited Asia. I mean, I'm just redoing what you're saying, which is to say that, see, nowadays they talk so much about intercivilizational linkages with the East, whether it's, how the kings of Thailand are called Rama and so forth. But actually, they don't care. I mean, by that I mean, even Korea, China, they don't care that much about the past. Like you go to Kyoto, it's a city full of Buddhas, you see. But
Yeah,
if you say let's establish our contemporary ties on the basis of Buddhism, no. So I think that even Asia is not interested in going back to its past, but they've embraced modernity, though it may not be the Western model entirely. Like Chinese modernity is a kind of communist modernity, and we keep forgetting that it's a single party which rules China and it's totalitarian. So I think that Asian linkages can no longer, except as a garnishing, as a decoration, be based on culture and civilizational ties, language, and so forth. They have to be based on realpolitik, as you said. Now, coming to your second point, which
yeah.
I think is also really, I mean, actually, I'll leave that for a moment because there's a question which is actually just about this. So let me read out that question and then I'll
Okay.
come back. I'll come back to your second point about the diaspora. Though I'll just say one little thing. What I meant is that obviously Rishi Sunak or Preeti Patel or Kamala Harris, they've sworn loyalty to their host countries. That's not the issue. But it's going to be very difficult given that the people backing them in their own countries, whether it's Britain or United States or Canada, I mean, they win partly because there's large Asian Indian populations there. Then there are very important CEOs of Google, CEOs of Microsoft, of
Yeah,
IBM, and so on. So all I'm saying is it's going to be very hard, like with Israel, it's going to be very hard to have a an open hostility between these groups because there is a cementing factor. I don't mean that there is dual loyalty. That's not what I meant. But I'm only going to say that given the power of the diaspora, they'll function as a lobby to ensure or at least try that India doesn't become too, US doesn't become too anti India. So even Canada, Ontario has passed some anti-India resolutions because of a very strong Sikh, some even say Khalistani lobby. And even then, the back room, there's always talk that Trudeau's Canada and Prime Minister Modi's India will not break ties because of that
yeah,
lobby. So that's what I
that's
mean.
true.
Anyhow, here's the question, Lord Desai, which has come from Dr. Chahal. He says, there was a stalwart, namely Dr. Ambedkar, who criticized Nehru while resigning from his cabinet in 1951. Our foreign policy is so pro-West, but ideally it should be best looking. How about that? East looking? Question mark. So, we've already covered this, but please say a few words about that.
Sorry, I mean, I don't quite remember Ambedkar's critique of Nehru's foreign policy, but that may have been there. I was sort of, but you know, East when Ambedkar was um, when Ambedkar resigned, could only have in the Soviet Union. There was no China. China was not powerful enough to be a military partner of India. And the Soviet Union, we were very friendly. We bought all those junk MiGs from Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was our only military partner, so we very much de facto. We may have been West inclined, but our military partners were the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union did not help us in the China in the China battle. So which is I think when we should have immediately changed. And had Lal Bahadur Shastri lived, I think the biggest shock in Indian system was the early death of Lal Bahadur Shastri. Had Lal Bahadur Shastri lived just 10 years as Prime Minister, we would not have had a dynasty uh, in India. In the Indian dynastic politics, the Congress dynasty would not have been there had Lal Bahadur Shastri lived. And Lal Bahadur Shastri was already inclining towards America. He suspended the plan, the fourth five-year plan. He said the first person to use the word Aam Aadmi in Lok Sabha, saying we have all these dams and schemes and plans. Does the Aam Aadmi benefit from it or not? He was the first person to raise that question. That the whole purpose of planning had to be to improve the welfare of the ordinary person. Now, that perspective went out. And we have always a grandiose perspective of starting factories to build factories or whatever. And I think we lost 40 years because of that. So anyway, my view is that we idealized the Soviet Union very much in those days. I mean, I grew up thinking not if, but when India would become communist. In the 1950s, we didn't discuss if, we just discussed when. And the atmosphere was absolutely much more pro-Soviet than anybody now remembers. And I remember, even the de-Stalinization speech by Khrushchev did not affect us. We were all absolutely. And communism was a lot of glamour. And the communist critique of history, Kosambi, people like that, were very influential. All debates in Indian economics were in terms of kulaks and Stolypin and things like that. We all use sort of Soviet terminology to discuss economic ideas. But then the old system broke down. The Soviet Union just collapsed. What do you say, a house of cards or something. So America somehow, from Nehru's perspective, Nehru's basically British upper class perspective, also slightly left wing. British were always anti-American, very snobby about Americans. at least before the First World War, when Nehru was there, he picks up that culture, and he's always. I remember in the last visit Nehru had to U.S. I was in U.S. at that time, and you could see that he was just not happy in the U.S. He thought this is a vulgar country, people showing off their wealth and so on. He was, why am I here, sort of thing. And we paid a price for that. Not very big a price, but we had to kind of rejig our policy. I think, I still feel that India's problem is India, not anybody else, because our uniqueness syndrome. We can't just be good. We have to be absolutely unique and different from everybody else because we have 6,000 years of history or whatever. It's, yes, you can have that, but then you have to have the power to back it up. To have the power to back it up, you've got to be absolutely serious about economic growth. And again, take just a 1980 to 2020 period, when both India and China abandoned their old bad policy and started new policy. India has never been single-minded about any policy. That's the nature of India. There's no single-mindedness about what India is, what it is purpose, what is the goal. Take 3 Indians and you will find two views at least, if not 4. So, I mean, there is, but that is in one way the strength. That is why India survived without a powerful state for 4,000 years. It's ultimately an anarchic, stable country. It only, so There's an advantage there, but it has never been single-minded. No government has been able to single-mindedly march the country on a path. Not us. That's not India. That's never been
So,
India. Sorry.
two more related questions, if I might field them
Sure.
for you. One is this is from Professor Rajveer Sharma, who is himself a political scientist. He says, "Excellent talk. What role do you assign to the many poles that emerged on the global scene, like G20, BRICS, SARC, ASEAN, and so on? And he says, how do you interpret India's look east and now act east policy within your theory of India belongs with the West? And then there's a related question from Professor Hitendra Patel, who's a historian. He says, some things you say need to be corrected. Nehru had gone to China in the early 40s, not after independence. Chiang Kai shek had also come and met with Gandhi in Calcutta. If one is familiar with Hobsbawm's work on post 1991 phase, Lord Desai has not disturbed us at all, but it's always a pleasure to listen to him. And then I'll come to another question from Professor Rajveer Sharma. But so these two questions are about, again, looking east. One has to do with Nehru's relationship with China, especially his personal friendship with Chiang Kai shek, which some people say lost us the war. And of course, the role of Krishna Menon. There's a new book which I've read by Jairam Ramesh on the life of V.K. Krishna Menon. And, if you remember in Bandung, there was this big question of who would have the top suite, whether it would be Chiang Kai shek or Nehru. I've been to both their suites. And it turned out that Chiang Kai shek got the suite
Not
on
Chiang
top.
Kai-shek. Chou
Yeah.
En-lai. Chou En-lai. Not
Sorry,
Chiang Kai-shek.
sorry, Chow En Lai.
Chou En-lai. Chou En-lai.
So
Yeah.
sorry, Chow En Lai. But apparently, Chiang Kai shek had also come to Calcutta and met Gandhi. So says Professor Patel. And the
Oh yeah, of
earlier,
course. Of course,
okay,
the Chiang Kai-shek did come to India. After all, he was an ally in the Second World War, and British India was part of the war. And Chiang Kai-shek was very well liked in India. And I had not realized that Nehru had physically gone to China. I stand corrected on that. But I know that when the Asian Relations Conference took place in Delhi, uh, before Indian independence, uh, uh, Nehru wanted to have this thing, the India as leader in Asia and so on, and that's where this idea took place that there was a Tibetan delegation and a Chinese delegation, and the Chiang Kai-shek government said that if the Tibetan delegation is admitted, China will walk out because we do not believe that Tibet is an independent country. And there's whole history about what Panikkar did or did not do. I won't go into all that. But no, what I meant by that, yes, and Nehru may have gone once, but Tagore went and interacted culturally with the Chinese and the Japanese. There's a China Bhavan in Shantiniketan. And Tagore was serious about Asia. Whereas, and I think Nehru went to Singapore as well and met Mountbatten there. But Nehru's visits after were kind of official visits. Uh, all Indian leadership for independence, they all studied, and some Inns of Court in London. And they were all kind of Western oriented. Not one went to anywhere east for studying. But that was the best universities at that time. I don't blame them. But uh, one forgets that while we talk about Asia, we don't actually like Asia. On the other question about G20 and so on, I think they partly arise from the failure of United Nations to offer a good meeting place, and partly also I don't think that they are all that effective. It's all right. Then I don't remember anything the G20 has done that's going to change the world. But I could be wrong. Again, it's partly because the IMF has become much weaker. You need some meeting for the economic policy and so on. But ultimately, uh, in terms of global political institutions, uh, there is a deterioration, certainly compared to the hopes we had in 1945 of what the world was going to be like. And this makeshift arrangement like G5, G20. I mean, look at BRICS. The word BRICS was invented by Goldman Sachs. There is no natural affiliation between BRICS. It's only that a very bright person in Goldman Sachs saw that these four countries were growing very rapidly and the stock market was doing very well. So he invented the word BRICS. And so now there's a BRIC concept. There's nothing in common in the one Brazil and Russia and India and China. What's wrong? Anyway, if they want to meet, they want to meet. But that there's no solid alliance except you know the military ones, as and when it is. Nothing else really matters.
In a way, we've come full circle after repudiating the idea of India's uniqueness. You yourself have affirmed it in a roundabout way that
Yeah.
we do, after all, have something which nobody else has. And I think on that optimistic note, we can look forward to a better future. And I do believe that the data suggests that we will also be very close to eliminating poverty over the next 10, 15, even 20 years if we continue to grow at a certain pace. And like an advanced society, we have 7 or 10% of our population as being poor, but most of the rest will be lifted out of poverty. In fact, in my own lifetime, I've seen, from being 70, 80% poor to being like 30% or 37% poor, depending on how you define that. And there are
Mm.
many other changes that we see in our own lifetime. You have seen more than I have, but we are very glad that we could hear you, even if we don't see you. But next time we want to see and hear you. And we would also be very interested in inviting both you and Lady Kishwar Desai to what used to be the Viceregal Lodge, because she runs a partition museum, and the Radcliffe line was drawn, that blood-soaked line, which is a scar on the face of the planet, was drawn hereabouts.
Yeah.
So, in post-COVID times, we invite both of you to the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, and I'm very grateful that despite being all by yourself and not having any technical assistance, you still could join us. And I want to thank all our fellows. I wish everyone a very happy holiday season, and also please remain COVID free. All of you, I'm proud to say not a single of our fellows during this difficult period has had COVID. And I pray and I honestly and earnestly urge all of us to take the precautions so that our fellows return to us after the break in better health or as good health as we bid them goodbye and Godspeed and au revoir. So thank you, Lord Desai. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much for having me, as we say, and look forward to seeing you. And hopefully, I hope I'm completely wrong, and India will be the power of the 21st century.
Thank you.
Thank
On
you.
that
Take care.
note,
Take
thank
care.
you. Thank you
Bye.
so much. Thank you all. Thank you.